Hey everybody, I hope you're well. It's JD here, and as promised, and I do apologize, it's a little bit later than planned, I'm uploading my video on how I personally structure my Terraform configuration files. Now, just to give you a bit of a backstory on where all of this has come from, this is in response to my LinkedIn post that I uploaded right here a few weeks ago, where I said a very clear and opinionated statement on how not to structure your Terraform configuration. This post really received a lot of feedback and comments and saying, that's great, you've told us how not to do it, but you've not really told us how to do it. So I'm responding to those comments, and I'm now uploading and I'm demonstrating how I personally structure my Terraform. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is the way that everybody should be doing it and this is the only way. I'm just saying that this approach works for me. And if you want to take this code and you want to adapt it and extend it, I'm going to be uploading all of this into my GitHub for you to have the ability to do that. Okay? All I'm personally saying is that this is my approach, this works for me, and if it works for you and it helps you on your Terraform journey, then that's great and that's a success in my mind. If you want to carry on with your multi-environment folder configuration because that's working for you and you don't mind the repetition and it's not causing you any trip ups, then I'm not going to stop you from doing that as well. But without no further ado, let's get straight into the Terraform. So as we can see, we've got our root repository here, and we have a series of files and folders. We've got our README, which is the standard README that's initialized with all repositories. We've got our make file, which is what I personally use for my Terraform orchestration. So I have all of my Terraform commands in make files that in turn go and execute a series of shell scripts that go ahead and run those Terraform commands. I actually lifted this off the Microsoft CAF repository just because I found that pattern worked really well. And really, I thought if it's good enough for Microsoft, it's definitely going to be good enough for me. So each of these shell scripts go ahead and, or each of these markdown commands, go ahead and run their specific shell scripts. I've got a templates folder that run my series of build Terraform and deploy Terraform commands. As you can imagine, in our build Terraform, we do all of our initializing, our building of our state, our Terraform plans, and then our deploy Terraform goes ahead and does the apply stage. Now, I don't really want to make this a CI/CD lesson and delve into too much how parameters are passed in and how templating works within YAML. Just want to take it through my pattern, and then you can go through this in more detail in your own time. Then we've got what we call our stacks, or what I like to call my stacks folder. So I've got my networking stack. I might have build upon this and add other stacks in here. I might have my specific application stack, etc., etc. And within here, I've got my Terraform configuration. So I've got my data.tf where I'll declare any of my data functions. I'll have my main.tf where I'll have my main composite orchestration where I'll call all my various modules. Got my outputs if I want to output anything to state, my providers, etc., etc. So as you can see, I've got one folder for all of my environments, but I'm using separate TF files. So I've got my dev.tf files, and I've got my prod.tf files, and I've got my test.tf files, okay? So we've got all of our different TF files for our environments. So as you can see, that our simple deployment here to deploy a resource group is got the environment parameterized, okay? I'm not hard coding this deb and then going to reduplicate this and put it in a folder called test and just change the name test. No, I'm going to use one parameter for my environments and put in different TF files depending on the environment that I'm calling. So as you can see in our dev.tf files, we've got our dev, and in our test, we've got our test, okay? So depending on which stage is being run in my Terraform dictates which TFRs file will be applied. So if we look in our build.terraform, we can see in our plan, we have a pipelines environment, and we're passing in the environment down into that plan stage, which is obviously calling the make TF plan. So if we go to that shell script for the minute, we can see that in our TF plan, we're running Terraform plan -var file Terraform workspace environment.tf-vars. Okay, so you can see that we're passing down the environment depending on what TF-vars are being applied. Cool, happy days. Now, what then a lot of questions I was getting on was then, well, how do you separate state? So as I mentioned in my comments, I use multi-stage YAML pipelines, and I'll demonstrate all of this shortly. But in short, I have my state.yaml and I parameterize my state file depending on which environment it's been deployed to. Okay, so you can see we've got our landing zone parameter hyphen environment. Our landing zone parameters coming from here, and our environment's obviously coming down from our environments.yaml where I've got all of my stages defined. Okay, so if we look at that state.yaml file again, we can see that what in turn should happen is that we should get a networking hyphen dev container depending on which environment I go to. So if I go to the test environment, that should go to networking hyphen test. So let's give that a go. So we're going to trigger this pipeline now. I'm just going to add a change. Let's commit change to repo. Happening in our feature deploy. We've got no pipelines at the moment, so let's go ahead and just create our pipeline. Cool. Now we've got our pipeline created. So this is now going to run our series of steps that we've got defined. So in our build.terraform, this is what's going to run here. It's going to install Terraform, and now it's going to configure that as your backend. So if we go to that state storage, we can see at the moment there are no containers in this storage account. But once this task is completed, we should be able to see that there should be a networking-dev container that should appear. Create a resource group. Cool, our backend has been created. So if we refresh that, we've got our networking-dev. Fantastic. Now you don't need to separate this necessarily at the container level. You could do this at a state file level. So you could have all of your networking state files under one container and separating your state file by its name. So you could have a state-dev or a state-test, etc. So now our Terraform plan is going to run, and what's that going to tell us? That's going to tell us it's going to add a resource group called rg-dev UK South 001 with some telemetry there for the login for the Microsoft guys on the AVM team. I've got some checkoff tasks that are just going to install that I just have part of my CI/CD pipeline. Fantastic, it's converting. Going to publish our checkoff results. Fantastic. Cool. Now we need permissions to this environment. We're going to permit that. You can see we've got our Terraform artifact there. I'm going to install Terraform. Just need to make sure it's still on the target machine, configure our variables, run our Terraform init again. And because we're happy with the plan, that'll go straight through and run the apply. And once we're happy with this, we can follow my DevOps method that I've got. I'm just going to go back to my GitHub. We're going to run our Terraform apply. Hopefully that will succeed, which it has. So let's just double check our resource group is there. Happy days, we have our new resource group. Oh, sorry about that. We have our new resource group. Obviously it's empty. This is basic configuration. But now let's demonstrate that we want to push this to test. Okay, so as you can see in my TF files, I've got in here test. So in theory, when we run our test stage, this should then deploy into with the same resource group, but with test instead of dev. So let's demonstrate that now. So I'm going to go to my repository, and I'm going to raise a pull request. Change that to feature deploy. I'm going to say create pull request. I'm going to say create test stage. Cool. I'm going to merge that. Fantastic. So now we should see that our test stage, cool, is running, and you can see our dev was fine. Now we've got our test stage here, and this should do exactly the same thing, but for our test stage. So what we should be getting now is a clean Terraform plan in our test environment, and also we should get that backend created with a test container. So if we go back to that original storage account we were looking at, the moment we can see we've got our networking-dev. Let's configure our Azure backend now. Brilliant. So now let's have a look at that container. Brilliant. We have now got our networking-test container. So this is how we separate our state files across the different environments. So we don't need to put everything in one state file. We don't come across that particular challenge in this scenario. We can run our Terraform plan, which is now telling me it's going to create rg-test 00 UK South 001. Fantastic. This is what we want. Now, a lot of people might be saying, well, this is very basic scenario, and agreed, this is a basic scenario. I'm just demonstrating that orchestration and that capability that you have to do this. There'll be endless scenarios where configurations are going to be needed differently for your different environments, and you can handle those on a case-by-case basis. Really, the purpose of this is to just demonstrate how easy it is to use your TFRs files for the separate environments. Fantastic, that build test is now complete. Going to permit to run our test stage. We're happy with the plan. You may have some extra guardrails and checks on this. That's absolutely fine. Terraform init. And we're going to run our apply. Just give that a minute or so. Happy days, our apply is now succeed. We just go onto that apply stage, we can see it's added our resource, etc, etc. So let's just double check we've got our new resource group. Now we have it, RG test UK South, although it's empty. If we just do RG dev, just to make sure that that hasn't disappeared for whatever reason, we can see we've got our RG dev UK South 001 as well. So this really does just demonstrate how easy it is to use TFRs to distinguish between the different environments. As I said, mentioned again, I appreciate that this is a very simple example, but it really just demonstrates again how easy it is to use TFRs to apply different configurations for your different environments. So that brings us to the end of our video. Now, I do appreciate that this was a very basic example of how you can use TFRs files to separate your configurations across multiple environments in Terraform. But the idea of this video was not to go through every single complicated scenario that you might have when it comes to environment separation. The idea was to just show you how you can have all of your Terraform files under a single folder, as well as showing you how you get around that state file issue across multiple environments under one Terraform configuration folder. As always, I hope you found this useful. As I mentioned in the beginning, all of this source code is going to be in my GitHub. Feel free to use, to extend and adapt as you may see fit for your specific scenario. Thanks everyone, and as always, have a great week. And if you've got any questions or queries, just reach out to me and pop me a message on LinkedIn. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.